Did Ellen White plagiarize? No. And those who accuse her of doing so simply haven't done their due diligence and properly researching. So grateful for this book right here, In Name Only by Lewis Walton. You can find this book on remnantpublications.com. And in chapter 3, called There Has Been a Voice Among Us, we find him addressing this charge on plagiarism. See, plagiarism laws were fairly new back then, and Ellen White complied with them. The general sentiment of whether or not you were going to use somebody else's thoughts was you had to improve upon it and make it your own. Now, granted, plagiarism means you take somebody else's work exactly as it is and claim it as your own. That's not what she did. Law back then stated you could use somebody else's literary property if you made it your own creative work. Again, this does not mean taking somebody's exact book and claiming it as your own. By the way, people have taken Ellen White's books and claimed them as her own, so they've plagiarized her, but she hasn't plagiarized others. Justice Joseph Story helped decide this law. And this quote right here, the source is down there at the bottom. It says, every book in literature, science, and art borrows and must necessarily borrow. No man creates a new language for himself, at least if he be a wise man. The thoughts of every man are, more or less, a combination of what other men have thought and expressed, although they may be modified, exalted, or improved by his own genius or reflection. Now he brings out the point that those who accuse Ellen White will take her writings, compare them with the writings of other people, and say, see, they're similar, she plagiarized. If we're going to do that, Paul plagiarized from Isaiah and all the prophets of the Old Testament then. Peter plagiarized all the prophets of the Old Testament. John the Revelator plagiarized the prophets who came before him. You see how foolish that sounds? Now, what Ellen White did do is she's read other books, she studied other books, and she says that's a good thought, and she improved upon it and made it her own. She didn't plagiarize it. She didn't take that thought exactly as it stood and say, this is now my thought. This is now my original thought. Check out this quote as well. Suppose an inspired prophet were now to appear in the church, to add a supplement to the canonical books. What a babel of opinions would he find? And how highly probable it is that his ministry would consist, or seem to consist, in the mere selection and ratification of such of these opinions as recorded with the mind of God. Absolute originality would be almost impossible. And when we see Bible prophets, Paul, Peter, John, they quoted from other portions of Scripture, they took their thoughts and made it their own. Because quite often their quotes from the Old Testament weren't exact quotes. They said, this quote is good, but I'm going to add this thought as well. So no, my friend, Ellen White did not plagiarize. She's not guilty of what you accuse her of. I highly recommend you read this book, remnantpublications.com. Also, stay tuned for my newest shareable called Testing Ellen White's Gift. Don't forget to go to the homepage of my website, scroll down, and sign up for my new newsletter.